The term culturicide, it means the intentional erasure of a people, but without killing them. It's through killing their culture.
From Amman, I am Francesca Maria Lorenzini, and this is Near East, the podcast that brings the East a little closer. Today we have Sophie Constantin, an archaeologist and cultural journalist at the Jordan Times, the leading English language newspaper in Jordan, where she reports on cultural preservation across the Middle East. Her work spans Jordan, Lebanon, West Bank, Iraq, and many other countries. She also focuses on the targeted destruction of cultural heritage in conflict areas. Thank you so much for joining us today, Sophie.
Thank you so much for having me.
So let's start from the beginning. Why did you decide to cover this topic? Because this is really niche, right?
Yeah, it is really niche. And it started because I have a background in archaeology. My studies are actually, I studied archaeology in Belgium. So I have a bigger sensitivity, let's say, to history and archaeology, of course. And during my journalistic work, I was still checking the reports from international organizations these reports sounded urgent. I was checking through Ecomos and I was seeing that this ancient souk has been destroyed in Gaza. This palace has been destroyed in Gaza. And to me, it sounded breaking news. As an archaeologist, it is breaking news. But no one was really covering it, just a few media. So this is how I started writing about it after agreeing with my editors. And once you start digging deeper into the intentional destruction of heritage, it's actually huge and it covers the whole planet, but the whole Middle East as well. And it's very, very, very strong in Gaza during the last 2 years. And that's why my first article was about Gaza. It was about the cultural genocide. In my opinion, we cannot really cover a genocide without talking about this. It doesn't seem complete to cover a genocide without covering the cultural part of it, because I felt when I was reading all these reports, there is an obvious will to cut these people from their roots. And that's how it started.
In fact, what's happening in Palestine has been called by experts as culturicide. What does it actually mean? And is it actually a term that has been used only for Palestine or it already existed?
So the term culturicide, it means the intentional erasure of a people, but without killing them. It's through killing their culture. It's targeting their historical monuments, their religious monuments, their language, their art. It can be anything that a people relate to culturally. And the term culturicide is very specific to Gaza. Of course, culturicide has many levels. And in the conflicts right now in the world, there is, for example, acts of culturicide in Sudan, but I'm not sure that the experts have put the term on it yet. Whereas in Gaza, it is a culturicide. It has been named like that in the Gaza Strip. For example, what a culturicide looks like on the ground, it's, for example, all the universities have been destroyed, all of them. Most of the schools have been destroyed. The cultural centers, the galleries, the museums. It also goes through archaeological thefts. We noticed now, after the past 2 years, that there has been thefts in those monuments, looting. This is culturicide. It's when all the cultural places where a culture can be transmitted are destroyed intentionally.
You've written about targeted attacks on cultural heritage in Palestinian territories, in Sudan, in Lebanon, in Iraq. What's the common thread linking all these cases?
So these countries have been affected by this at different scales, obviously. We cannot compare Lebanon to Palestine as we cannot compare Sudan to Palestine. Those are very specific cases, and they have suffered from different levels of culturicide. I just want this to be sure. Now, what's common in all of these is that the culture is the target. For some reason, for many reasons actually, the target during this war is culture as well. So as I said, for Gaza, it has happened also in Sudan. So targeting of museums. The museums have been raided. There are snipers and soldiers fighting in museums. You could ask yourself why. The art galleries, also the living artists, are suffering from that. What they have in common is that the culture is a target. And this means that these people, after the war, so the post-war recovery is going to be very difficult, because after a war, people have not many things left to hang on to build their identity around, to rebuild their identity around, because it has been destroyed mostly at different levels. That's what's common.
In times of war, we often hear political leaders threatening to destroy cultural sites. I'm thinking about Donald Trump, that in 2020 threatened to target over 50 cultural heritage sites in Iran. This is not an isolated case. Why does cultural heritage become the target?
So the reason why cultural heritage becomes a target is because many people don't realize it, but culture is the foundation of a people, of a society, of a country. It's the foundation. The food you eat, the language you speak, the museums you go to, even the places you hang out to, those are all inscribed in a cultural background that is personal to the person, to the group of people, and to the land that they live in. And when you try to destroy this, it's like you're saying you were never here. It's weakening the presence of the people in this land. It's to cut them off from their roots. It's to make sure that they never come back. For example, targeting cultural heritage will push displacement and make displacement of people easier. Because when people, for example, in Gaza, when the mosques that they've been attending the prayers to are destroyed, the cultural centers are destroyed, their streets is destroyed, everything historical that they can relate to is destroyed. And if they leave, well, they might not want to come back, because they lost this collective memory, this identity, this cultural identity is lost. So it makes the displacement easier. It's cutting the people from their lands. Now, another thing why cultural heritage is a target, it's because it makes money. So in Sudan and in Palestine, in many countries, in Iraq as well, the destabilization of the cultural system opens the door to thieves and looters. And as we saw in Sudan, we have seen snipers being placed in a museum. And you ask yourself, why are they fighting inside the museum? Well, you have your answer when 5 months later, Sudanese artifacts were found on eBay. Those fighters were there to steal artifacts, because they know there is a black market, there is an international black market of stolen antiquities. And they sell those antiquities to make more money, to buy weapons, and, So looting makes money, destroying this heritage and stealing it makes money, but also makes the displacement of people easier. And the third thing that is present also in Palestine is that destroying the cultural heritage of a people makes the rewriting of history easier. When you have destroyed all the proofs of the presence of a people in a land, it's easier to rewrite who was there.
What you're saying is it's actually really interesting. And does it happen only in the Middle East, or we had some cases like this also in Europe?
It's not specific to the Middle East, although it also happened in Iraq. It also happened in Armenia. A lot of Armenian churches have been targeted just for being Armenian churches to further push the Armenians outside of their land. And it also happened in Bosnia, in Europe. So it's not a phenomenon that is specific to the Middle East, but it has happened way more in the Middle East than anywhere else. But if you want to go further in history, it also happened with the Native Americans, and in Australia and Canada, all these native populations, they also suffered from a cultural side, because their language was prohibited. Their songs, their clothes, everything was put in place for them to not have their identity anymore. And when you do this to a generation, well, the next generation is most likely to not speak the language, to not be connected to the land, to suffer from this. So this is also part of cultural side.
At the same time, there are also some local initiatives to preserve this culture or to rebuild it. Can you make some examples?
There are some local initiatives. But for example, in Gaza right now, it's very hard for them to be focused on preserving their heritage when the situation of survival is way more important. These people have to focus on survival right now, even though I've seen some reports saying that some mosques, the most ancient mosque in Gaza, people have been trying to rebuild it and to find the stones and to start again. So it's mainly individual initiatives.
In this picture, what is the international community doing?
The international community cannot stop the bombs from being dropped. So we have to start with that. The international community can only create laws and rules and enhance those laws to protect this heritage. But the problem is, if the people dropping the bombs are not respecting the laws, then it doesn't make sense. It doesn't work. But other than that, so as I've said, they've been trying to enhance laws. For example, many sites in Lebanon and in Palestine over the last year have been placed on lists of endangered heritage. So this is also part of the international communities trying to protect this heritage and show you cannot touch it. It's a heritage in danger and it has to be protected. Now it's up to the people holding the bombs and the guns to respect this. There has been many things actually. I mean, there has been exhibitions around the world, notably one in Paris about the heritage of Gaza. So it's more about an awareness campaign than an actual protection. There has been in Sudan last year, a year and a half ago, I saw some reports saying that some living artists were really struggling because the militias had destroyed their lifeline, their art studio. And I saw that UNESCO developed some urgent programs to take care of them and to give them a little bit of funds because they were ending up with nothing, these artists. Also, UNESCO mainly has done satellite monitoring of Gaza, and they have been publishing the reports every now and then about the satellite monitoring.
Apart from rebuilding, preserving a cultural heritage can be seen as a form of cultural resistance. Can you expand on this?
Of course, expressing your cultural identity is a form of resistance. And I guess that most people who are suffering in a genocidal war are focused on survival. But there has been some individuals that have been trying over the past years to resist and preserve their culture. I've seen myself in Jordan, there is a whole generation of originally Palestinian girls who noticed that their grandmothers and great grandmothers are doing embroidery, but not them. And that if they don't learn how to do it, this ancient arts craft might be lost. So I noticed a full generation of girls trying to get back on traditional handcrafts for the sake of protecting heritage and making sure it's not lost. Now in Gaza and Sudan, we have seen youth and young people trying to document through photography, videos. They've been doing a lot of this, and I think this is a form of preserving the heritage. Also, preserving heritage, it comes mostly through arts, culture, and music, and it's mostly coming from the diaspora, but yeah, it exists.
For those listeners who want to know more about this topic, is there any book, documentary, or report you would advise them to check out?
It depends on what country and what subject exactly. I can only advise that the ICOMOS is an international organization that is focused on heritage. The branch of Palestine for ICOMOS has released very detailed reports on the destruction of the specific heritage. Now, other than that, I believe that this very niche subject, the intentional destruction of culture, is not really available to the public easily. Some podcasts have published a few episodes only, but they are not dedicated to that. A few books also focus on the legal point of view, so they're not really easy to digest for an amateur, let's say. So that's the point of this subject, is that it's not very covered, it's not very talked about, and it's pretty niche. So yeah.
Thank you to Jordan Times journalist Sophie Constantin for joining us today. And thank you for listening. See you in the next episode with another expert to make you feel the East a little closer.